Hello and welcome to Stockholm Clojure Meetup, hosted by Agile. We're going to have two presentations today. We're going to have Peter and then Josh. Peter is going to talk about give me interactive programming or give me death.
Thank you, Ola. Ladies, gentlemen, wonderful to see you here. Tonight, I want to encourage you to ask yourself a question that I wish I had asked myself much more often. What makes work fun? I plan to do this by telling you a few stories of when I have had fun with software development and a tiny bit of when I haven't. This is the way I want to work. I said this some 5 years ago, putting words on something that had started more as a feeling. I was enjoying being a product owner. I love product, and I felt done with my programming career. That I felt done with programming was a bit peculiar, though, because I have always liked it. Ever since I got my Commodore VIC 20 from my parents as a Christmas gift that year when I was about to turn 14. There were tons of fun games on the VIC 20. But not that I play them very much, because when you started the VIC 20, it showed the message, CBM Basic, 3,583 bytes free, ready. And under ready, there was a box blinking, a cursor. This was a prompt. Via the prompt, this computer read what I typed, ran the instructions, which possibly printed something, and then showed me the prompt again. You might recognize this pattern. I will return to it. Ready, blinking cursor. I learned to code using my VIC 20 and its tiny handbook. This book dealt only with how to program the computer. This is page 2. Skriv detta program. Type this program. So that actually showed a bit complicated programs. I will make a easier one here. Like that. And what's more complicated with the first example here is that if you started the line typed with an integer, then nothing was printed.
But that machine down there, it's a C64. The 20s was only white. They came in white only. I know. I had them. And right now I have 3 C64s. Tough audience.
So take a look at that. So the computer saved those lines in its memory. It was added to the program. You can picture this as the program with the capital P. The integer instructed the computer at which sequential slot in the program this line should be entered at. And then if I typed run, Pint, yeah. Let's show me something else. This is not just any crap REPL. This is actually a code editor, a line editor. So if I start what I type with a reuse and a line number, then that thing will be replaced. in the program. Oh, it's hard to type here. Okay, let's try again. So like that. So the computer reads my input, evaluates it, prints things, and then loops back to me for results. For more input. So the start program of VIC-20 is, of course, a REPL. Then, if I typed go_to, followed by an integer, then the program was run from that line. So if I do go_to 20, it will run that line. But this was not just from the prompt, it was also for the program, because run and go_to were instructions in CBM Basic. So if I do 30 run, and then go_to 10, you will see the most famous VIC-20 program. Like that. And just to reiterate that this is a so this is the program, and we can then replace okay, it stopped working. Let's go on. This emulator I haven't really different. Well, anyway, when I programmed the VIC-20, I started with no program at all. And then I typed the program line by line, piece by piece, updating lines as I went, and the program emerged and mutated according to my will. I think Frederick Brooks must have used a system like this when he wrote, "The programmer, like the poet, works only slightly removed from pure thought stuff. He builds his castles in the air, from air, creating by exertion of the imagination." This is how it felt coding the VIC-20. I created games and utilities. The program me and my sister used the most was for practicing vocabulary. I wrote that one so that I could have more time to code. The feeling that I wanted to code my whole life was strong. My first job was as a programmer. I made programs that tabulated results from marketing research surveys, and programs that made diagrams from these tables. For a long time, I drew the diagrams using plotter printers. And we bought plotters that had HPGL as their control language. And then I used other programming languages for the logic. It could be shell scripts, awk, Perl, C, Tickle, you name it. In our printer room, there were 20-ish printers printing throughout the days, sometimes the nights too. Or I should say some plotters were printing. Plotters easily jammed, and they were generally suffering from lots of downtime, and they were slow. So it was very important for us to look for alternatives. There appeared a printer technology called thermal transfer, where heat was used to stick color onto the paper, a bit like when you use an iron to glue a print on a t-shirt. These printers were much faster than the plotters. At some point, I bought a printer supporting another printer language named PostScript. The handbook had instructions for how to hook a terminal to the serial port of the printer and enter PostScript programs. And if I typed show page, at the terminal, the printer printed a page. Wow, I felt a bolt of pleasant recognition from this. I bought 4 PostScript books. The RGB books from Adobe, and one named Thinking in PostScript. A PostScript program starts as a blank sheet of paper, and then it grows, piece by piece, function by function, into a whole program. My workflow was to type both in a text file and at the PostScript prompt. So I send the file as it was to the printer, and then I copied changes from the file and pasted them in the terminal. The code took shape in the file, and the program emerged in the printer. PostScript is an elegant and delightful language. I had thus far never coded anything that felt so fantastic. It was as if I was one with the printer, and that together we created whatever I could dream up. I really started to think in PostScript. And the PostScript REPL was many times more wonderful than even the VIC-20 REPL. I implemented a compliant enough HPGL in PostScript. This improved our throughput orders of magnitude. It also bought me time to rewrite all the diagramming logic in PostScript. Instead of using the other programming languages to create printer instructions, they now transform data shaped for the printer program. The result was pure magic. Our customers could suddenly start to wish for almost anything. There was something very robust with bringing it all down to data and then applying PostScript functions on this data. So now I had a workflow where I could grow the program that turned the data into business graphics in the printer. I always want to work like this. When the web became a thing, of course, I tagged along. At first, it was web interfaces for the diagramming engines and also for the data collection. Then totally other things. I worked full stack, and I wasn't picky with what programming languages I was to use. Java, C, Python, C#, Perl, PHP, JavaScript, Pike, Objective-C, C++, you name it, I used it. But my work programming wasn't as joyful anymore, for reasons I did not quite understand. In hindsight, I can see one of the reasons. I had been the one thinking up my castles, creating them out of thin air. Now other people did that thinking, and I coded their ideas. Work was now organized into people responsible for the product and people responsible for the technology. And as both a product and tech person, I was a bit torn apart. At some point, I quit programming for food and became a product owner. For 6 years, I did not question this, even though often I found myself coding, having a hard time putting some coding problem away. But that feeling of magic wasn't there. Maybe it was too different from 15, 20 years ago with PostScript. Come 2014, and I found myself part of starting a new kind of bank. Our architect, Linus Eriksson, had us take a bet on Clojure and ClojureScript. He and Ville Svärd, both from Magical, had a very interesting workflow. When I brought a suggestion to them, they could start with opening an empty buffer in Emacs. They typed some code into this buffer and sent it somewhere. And it returned with the results. They looked at the results, typed some more, sending it away again. And we discussed the results. They sent new code, returning us new results. After some turns of this, that thing we have been talking about emerged, modified by the feedback we had received. Sometimes the results was a prototype validating our thinking or showing us how we had been in error. Other times, the new behavior of our bank was implemented after such a session. I got so curious. My whole being tickled. Linus and Ville, they noticed this, and they often invited me to the programming table. Together we had fun at my attempts to force in my imperatives on Clojure. I was new to functional programming. But despite this friction, I felt it again. Strong. That sense. Overwhelmingly clear. This is how I want to work. Pure data, pure functions, and a REPL. And now I knew it was called a REPL. It connected me to the program, which emerged under my fingertips. I shifted back to being a programmer. And never again will I go astray from what I love to do. And never without a REPL. In the process, I created Calva for myself. Calva has a command for firing up a getting started REPL. It has now downloaded instructions, an introduction to Calva, as well as to Clojure, for me to interact with. You get the picture. At this point, the program is empty, save for some 200-300 standard functions that ship with Clojure. But if I evaluate this expression, it creates a new function. And if I change this expression and evaluate again, the program mutates. And so on and so forth. We build our castles out of thin air, from air and our imagination. This is what makes work fun for me. Thanks for listening. Yeah, I'm ready to take some questions, and Viggo here has a microphone for someone.
What do you use for your slides?
Thank you for that question. So I use something called Joyride. Because you remember my first colleagues that showed me Clojure, they were using Emacs. And Emacs is fantastic. You can reconfigure it as it is running, throwing elisp at it. It is this program that you can mutate as you work. And that is what Joyride is. So I don't think I have really the time to demo Joyride now, but I'd be happy to, after Josh has talked, to show you Joyride. I can tell you that I've been using it for this thing that I opened this page, and I've also used it for this timer that I forgot to start when I talk. So just since I used this for my slides, then it also makes sense to make it help me keep track of the time. So yeah, so that's Joyride is making VS Code very much into some kind of Emacs, but with a much more nice programming language. So it's you should try it. Do I have any more questions?
Do you ever go back to PostScript?
Will I go back to PostScript?
Yes. Did you ever?
No, I never returned to PostScript as such. What happened was that Apple, or rather Next, chose PostScript as the display language for the next Cube or the next OS. And so at some point I got hold of one of those, and then I had much faster feedback and runtime on them. But then I think this is when the web came, and it started to be not so interesting to produce these business graphics on paper. Well, then it was produced on screen and other technologies. So I had no reason to return to PostScript really. But it is, when I found Clojure, I realized that it's very, very similar to PostScript, even though there are no brackets in PostScript. So that's also, I think, goes to show that the brackets is not what makes a Lisp or a Clojure really. It is something else. But it's super dynamic and wonderful. I think that a new programming language for some other environment could actually jump off from PostScript, and people would love it. Yeah, we have another question there.
As new to the Clojure community, I'm finding it a big challenge, even though you have written the great Calva.
And the getting started REPL.
But actually getting a project up and running, and because I've been programming for most of my life, I have an idea what I want to do.
Yeah.
So I'm finding it's a struggle to get where I want to be, just to start. And that's what I find the biggest hurdle in the Clojure. What's your suggestion to overcome this sort of, because when we are talking to other Clojure programmers, everything is so natural.
Yeah. You
So
should keep talking to them, I think is my suggestion. So I can really recommend the Clojurian Slack.
Yeah, I'm there.
You're there?
Yeah. And I find it a great place.
Yeah, okay.
And it helps out, but it's still, you find it's kind of troublesome.
Yeah, of course, you will. I think there are a lot of like templates, programs you can start, depending on what it is you want to start with. There is a framework kind of thing that's called Kit. Used to be called, or it's a successor, I would say, to Luminous, and that will set stuff up, because often I think that in Clojure, since you pick and choose every like library thing, and there are no frameworks really, right? So this can make it hard to start. So then I think like an opinionated framework thing like Kit could help a lot. But if I will still just reiterate that the Clojurians, like if you're there, just ask. People are so friendly there and ready to help, because we are like desperate to bring in new Clojurians. And also this year, I am sponsored by Clojurists Together to focus on this getting started story more, and getting it easier to get your first thing going. So hopefully, and I'm not the only one, so that's the focus of the whole Clojure Toolsmith community this year. So I think the story will improve also after this year, hopefully. Yeah, I think that I will stay here. You can ask me questions during the night, and I'd be happy to demo joyride for you. And so I should actually get my ass off to here. Hey, look.